Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, final boss and internet shitlords, and I guess it's, I don't know, what is it, quarantine day 3 or something like that? I don't know what it is where you're in your neck of the woods, but over here, I think it's really funny maybe it's a thing about being in a Latin American country. The people that seem really freaked out about Koro-chan, we'll call her, is it's the government. They're freaking out. They're canceling everything, shutting down everything, quieting everything. And we just recently elected a right-wing government into power. If it had been a left-wing government, I think that their response would have largely been kind of the same, probably, but it's just something funny about that a right-wing government is now using police to tell people to disperse when they're in the streets, and there's just something that doesn't look quite good about that, to be honest. But it's all okay, and I mean it's really funny here because there's like 50 cases now, but almost all of those cases are traceable to one idiot, to one woman who came from Milan, was already feeling the sniffles or whatever, not the sniffles, I guess, a sore throat, a little bit of a cough, but decided the day after she got back from Milan, where there was already an outbreak, to go to a wedding where there were 500 people, right? And these are all people that are like people from the very high end of society, right? They live in the really fancy neighborhood. They're, the elites, if you would. And of course, this is a disease of the elites. It goes there, but it starts there because they're the ones that travel, right? But I think it's not going to be the police that's going to be like rounding up and isolating the people that are, the rich heiresses from Carrasco or whatever, right? They're going to be going to whatever neighborhood and telling these impoverished locals to disperse. So, don't know what to say about that. Anyways, that's not the topic for today. But what I was thinking was this. Given that a lot of you probably are obliged to stay at home now, or maybe not obliged literally, but semi-obliged, let's say. And I don't know how many of you plan on keeping up your in-person gaming groups. Some of you I know probably don't have a gaming group and haven't had for a long time, but some of you probably do have a regular game, and it's actually a living per people game and not like the abomination of playing on the internet. And I don't know, what are you going to do? Are you going to be playing regardless, or is the plan that you were going to cease activity? I guess it might depend on where you live too. Tell me in the comments how this is affecting your own gaming group and whether or not your own gaming group is still coming together. As for me, my own policy has been very clear to the members of the gaming group that if someone is sick, they should absolutely not come. But otherwise, with some basic safety measures of not sharing food, no physical contact. This being a country where people, hug and kiss each other to agree, which is so is Italy, by the way, which explains why there is such a terrible epidemic there, right? And careful washing of hands. Anyways, all of that will take care of it, I think. But I also don't want any of my players to feel like they have to come, right? If they don't, they wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. So we'll see how it goes over the next little while. I guess the first test will be this weekend. But if you don't have a lot to do, then you've got a couple of options. You could read some RPG books, right? You could get some new RPG books. So you could pick up my games like Dark Albion or Arrows of Indra or Lion and Dragon or the brand new Medieval Authentic Companion, which is already a silver bestseller and doing really, really well. Hugely good reviews. A source book that you can use in any RPG product, or at least definitely any D&D based RPG product. to make your game setting more medieval authentic. And so that I certainly do recommend that option. But if you're not going to read books that you already have or get new books that you already have, maybe you're going to try your hand at work. If your games are all canceled, you might want to design that setting that you've been meaning to design all this time, right? Or to prepare for that epic campaign that maybe you've always wanted to run. And maybe you're even going to make that into a book, right? And so Uncle Pundit is here with a bit of advice about what to do. And maybe I'll do more than one of these series, but today, the first piece of advice, the first thing that I think is like the most crucial thing to keep an eye out in this case, to avoid the mistake, is make sure you don't use stupid fake language in your setting. Okay, you can use fake language if it's clever, but not stupid fake language. And so many fantasy settings today are done with stupid fake language. What do I mean by stupid fake language? Well, what I mean is these words that clearly have no real phonetic sense within the context of our own, almost always no sense within the context of our own Western tongue and Western ears, but also bear no resemblance to any other human culture's resonating language. So it's a made-up language completely out of nothing, usually with way too many apostrophes, and you all know the type. And you know what? At this point, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The moment I talk about it, it started with Klingon, I guess, but then it turned into something where every half-assed, you can almost, it's like a marker. If you see place names or people's names that have apostrophes in the middle of them, then you're almost guaranteed that product is going to be crap, right? Whether it's a book, a novel, a movie, a TV show, a comic book, or an RPG. And if they have two apostrophes in a single place name or person name, then it's absolutely guaranteed to be crap, right? So just why do people still do this? Why do they use these stupid made-up languages? I think it's because they don't know any better. I think also it's because a lot of gaming nerds are, kind of autistic, and they think that there's something cool about stuff that isn't always really all that cool, I guess some of these names can be made to sound in some emotive sense for a certain type of 13-year-old boy can sound badass, right? Even though really they don't do anything, because a lot of these words that are used are words that don't even connect correctly to an emotive sense, right? If you're going to make up a word, I'm going to give you a great example of a really good made-up word, okay? In the Rifts RPG, there's these evil villains who are these monstrosities, these tentacle dudes, and they're called the Splugorth. Splugorth is a great word to use when you're designing a setting for a monstrous tentacle mass creature. The word even just sounds like that, right? And that is really a key to good game design. It sounds stupid, but it really is, right? You want to make your setting, your world, and the things in it connectable. And to connect, you want to make it approachable in a way that it doesn't require that you learn, well, probably that you learn any language, but especially that you learn some alien tongue that was just invented by the designer and that has no real connection to any human context, right? So, this applies as much as in terms of names for things as for names of people, as for names of places. When you look at real settings, because part of the problem is that makes those settings feel less real, right? I'm not saying this just because it's a pet peeve of mine. I'm saying this because it is actually something that diminishes games. How many really successful settings or, literary settings or worlds do you know of that have really done this and succeeded, right? I mean, in Star Trek, they introduced the stupid Klingon language, and it succeeded because they're nerds, autism, Klingons, and it was already an established franchise, right? But the most popular fantasy setting in history, in modern history anyways, is not named some, ghastly thing with 8 syllables and 3 apostrophes. It's called Middle Earth, right? That's it, Middle Earth. Okay, and that tells you all you need to know. It's Earth and it's in the middle, right? There's 2 things you need to know about Middle Earth. So it's something that's immediately approachable. And that's really useful in a game. When you're creating places in a game setting, those places can be one of 2 kind of elements, right? It can have the place names can either be something that should be presented in the straightforward version of the language. For example, Beijing just means northern capital, right? So to us, it's a strange sounding word, let's say for a Westerner, but it really means capital of the north, right? And in a lot of the places that you'll find in Europe, in their own language, just really mean either in the modern way or in some case in an antiquated version of the same language, be it English, German, French, whatever. It really just ends up meaning something common about what's in the area, right? So the other way is to have it be an archaic version of that same thing, right? So London is a kind of tricky one. We don't know exactly what that one derived from, but some people think it was the city of Lud, right? But let's say you call, you could always name a town something like Newgate, right? Well, okay, or Newgate could be a good name for a neighborhood, right? But Newton, right? Newton is new town, right? And if you look at, this is something that applies universally. If you look at, like in India, Delhi, Delhi is a word that is a derivation or a degeneration of a word that meant gateway, because Delhi was the gateway to the plains of the Ganges Delta. So the plains, anyways. So the reason to look at these sort of, if you're making a setting and you want it to be vaguely Western, then try to use Western sounding names for things, and don't go overboard either. In some cases, it's enough to call a place Forest Home, or something like that. That's completely adequate, and it's going to immediately evoke something. Whereas if you call it Dalshar Nagar, right, nobody's going to know what that means or what they're supposed to feel about it or what it seems like. The real terrible extreme of this in setting design is when you start like renaming everyday things and then demand in your book that people learn those things to actually be able to read your book. Yeah, I've reviewed an enormous amount of RPG books over the years. If you go to the RPG site and you look in the reviews section, you'll see there's hundreds of them. And I don't remember exactly which one it was that did this, but I remember there was one RPG book that was really quite bad, where the author had decided he wanted to have a made-up language. It wasn't really a made-up language, it was just a made-up vocabulary, right? Because at least Klingon, as stupid as it is a language, right? And it is stupid. I'm sorry if you've learned Klingon, right? But, I've seen nerds that are like, oh, you don't know Klingon? No, I was busy at the time, studying Hebrew and Latin, Like I was learning actual languages and Sanskrit, like real languages that might have some kind of a purpose beyond showing off what a huge Star Trek nerd you are. But at least it's a real language, right? And at least, Tolkien made up the Elven language. But first of all, he made it up from the roots of European languages so that it would still seem familiar. He was smart enough to do this, right? You're not smart enough to invent a language, probably. If you're listening to this, odds are you're not smart enough to invent a language. But he made it Elven was a full language. It was a whole thing, right? And it had rules and grammar and everything. And it was derived from something that was identifiable to our ears because of history. even if we didn't understand what the words meant. In the same way that, if you hear German, it's identifiable to your ears even if you don't know German. But you're probably going to just make a bunch of vocabulary words. And if you make a vocabulary word for common things, like in this one game that I remember, this guy invented a made-up word. I forget what it was. Just, I can't even fathom to guess, right? But it had an apostrophe in it, obviously, for the word sword, right? And then he insisted, after that, for the whole rest of the book, to use that word instead of a sword. So that if you were looking, you'd have to be like, what the hell is this again? You'll go, oh, he's talking about a sword. Yeah, it's just so stupid, right? Why would anyone do that? I mean, if I was making a game about Spain, right, a historical RPG set in Spain, I might at some point in the book point out that the Spanish word for sword is espada, right? But even there, given how common a language it is, I wouldn't replace the word sword with espada everywhere and demand that you know and remember that espada means sword. Okay? And yet this guy does it with some bullshit word he just invented and that he thinks is going to make his game seem super awesome cool, when actually all it's going to do is make it much harder for people to be able to get into it. Even when this is done by really clever people, right, like Amir Barker, who made Tecumel. One of the reasons Tecumel never took off the same way that Blackmoor did, or that the Wilderlands did, or that any of the other, Greyhawk, any of the other early D&D settings did, is because there was too much of a cultural buy-in. And there didn't have to be, right? Like when I made Arrows of Indra, it's based, Tecumel was largely based on Indian culture. And Arrows of Indra is based, obviously, on the epic Indian setting of the Mahabharata. And in there, I do use some Indian words, some Sanskrit words, I mean to say. But those words, I'm very careful of when and how I use it, right? So I do have the place names in the Sanskrit words for the places, right? Like the Magadha kingdom, Kurukshetra, right? Even those, even from non-Western cultures, even if you've never studied anything about India or China or Africa, you'll be able to kind of tell, right? Because it's just part of the cultural zeitgeist. You'll be, oh, that sounds Indian, right? And so, let's say you don't speak Sanskrit, but if you're going to be way better off basing a setting, the idioms, the words of a setting, on an Indian-sounding language, or an Arabic-sounding language, or a Swahili-sounding language, or a Chinese Mandarin-sounding language, than if you just make something up. Don't do that. Jesus, right? So, like, and in Arrows of Indra, I made it an approachable game, so that, I call swords swords, right? I do everything possible to not require that you have to study a whole bunch of linguistics just to get into the setting or its culture or anything like that. And I even try to really make the cultural weirdness of the setting, in the sense that this is not something from Western culture. It's not actually weird, but it's very, very different, right? But so to you it might feel weird. I try to make that as approachable as possible by emphasizing where there are the connections and by trying to simplify the parts that might seem really complex. And I think that it's successful in that sense. Whereas, Tecumel certainly has been successful with a very tiny niche of people, but the insistence on the Solyani language stuff has made it the sort of thing a lot of people look at and go, well, I don't know, right? Think about the most popular modern fantasy setting of recent times. It's called Westeros, right? Westeros, the island in the west, okay? So just remember this. Venger Satanis is wrong, okay? That's what this video is about. You do not want to name. The reason he can be kind of forgiven for that is because he's so over the top and campy, and his stupid gonzo style is meant to be, it's almost like he's begging to be mocked for it, right? I don't think he really believes those words are cool. I can't imagine it. I can't imagine he would be that deluded. But he insists on using these kinds of words, and it can drive one nuts if the guy really believes that he's being like super awesome, oh, I'm so cool because I've invented a word with 4 apostrophes in it. Don't do that, right? When you make your setting, make it approachable, unless you want to alienate your players or for them to make fun of you the way I make fun of Benjer. Okay, that's the message of today. So, I guess that's it for this video. Please share it anywhere that you want to besmirch Benjer's name, or that you think that any of what I've said today will interest people or challenge them. Like the video, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. You want to check out all my other videos, right? And to be notified, hit the notification bell of when I make another video. I'll probably do let me put it this way, if any of my gaming groups cancel because too many players either are sick or can't come or decide not to come, then I'll probably do some more live streams to make up for it, because I'm definitely not going to be starting to play online. That's never going to happen. Right? But I might do some live streams. And you'll want to know when those are, right? So be sure to hit that notification bell. If you want to support me, apart from sharing and liking, which is really good and I thank everyone who does it, you can send me money directly by PayPal or by Patreon. But what I would suggest is check out my books, check out my products, books like Dark Albion, books like Arrows of Indra, books like Lion and Dragon and the Medieval Authentic Companion. And they're all very affordable, and they're all really good, and you could get something for your trouble. If you still think it's a little too expensive, you want something more on a kind of Patreon level, well then buy one of my RPG Pundit Presents magazines, one of my PDFs, my weekly PDFs. That there's 99 of them. Issue 100 is coming out very soon, from what I understand it. I just talked to the publisher, and the publisher says it's looking really good. It's making great progress. So I'm hoping it'll be out before the end of this month. I hope. I can't promise. Issue number 100 will be very special. But for now, check out the other RPG Pundit Presents issues. And whenever you buy one of those, you'll get something that you can use in your D&D campaign or your OSR campaign or some other fantasy campaign. Lots of variety of stuff that you could choose from in terms of the topics. It's all in the description below. The link is available there. And, they cost like anywhere from 99 cents to $4.99. So it's like you're tipping me a coffee, but you're also getting something back. And I like that. And I hope you do too. And yeah, I guess that's it. Don't be like Benjer. Use proper linguistics when creating a setting. Make sure that you're keeping it as emotive as possible, more than even simple. Like whether or not you're using basic English, whether you're calling a place, Crosstown, or whether you're calling it something else, right? What you want is for the place to have an evocative sense when you're thinking of it. And same thing with creatures, same thing with people, etc. Do that and you're going to succeed. Currently smoking Lorenzetti Solitario Egg plus Argento Natural.